My name is Maya Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and the night my brother handed me the microphone in front of 200 people, he had no idea I'd been preparing for that moment for 6 months. He thought I was going to talk about what a great guy he is. He thought I'd cry a little, say something sweet about watching him fall in love, maybe embarrass him with a childhood story. He'd been counting on me to do what I'd always done: show up, smile wide, and make him look good. He forgot that I'm the one who sold her car. He forgot that I'm the one who emptied her savings account while he was posting Instagram reels from a villa in Santorini. He forgot that I still have the bank statements. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the place where everything broke. Our mother had a brain aneurysm on a Tuesday in October. I was in the middle of a third-grade parent-teacher conference when my phone buzzed against the table, my aunt's name on the screen, her voice already shaking before I could say hello. By the time I got to Mercy General, my mother was in a gown under fluorescent lights, looking somehow smaller than she'd ever looked in my entire life. A woman who had spent 30 years filling every room she entered, suddenly reduced to a thin wrist and a hospital bracelet. The neurosurgeon met us in the hallway. "Unruptured," she said. "Caught early. Treatable. But we're looking at surgery within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And the procedure itself, plus recovery, plus the specialized facility," she slid a printed estimate across the desk, like she was apologizing for it. I stared at the number, breathed through it, asked the questions a responsible person asks about payment plans and coverage gaps, and what insurance would and wouldn't touch. My husband Marcus was a pediatrician. We were comfortable, but we weren't sitting on a pile of emergency cash. We had a down payment fund, a retirement account we'd promised each other not to touch, and my car, a 3-year-old Subaru I loved more than I will ever admit out loud. I called my brother from the hospital parking lot that night. He picked up on the second ring, which surprised me, because my brother's successful corporate attorney, corner office, the kind of guy who screenshots his own LinkedIn notifications, usually let calls from me roll to voicemail. I told him everything. The aneurysm, the surgery, the number on the estimate. There was a pause on his line. Then, "I hear you, Maya. This is serious. Let me look at my accounts and figure out what I can move. We'll split it down the middle, okay? That's what family does." I believed him. I wrote it down in my notes app because that's the kind of person I am. I write things down so I don't misremember, so I can't be told later that I imagined something that never happened. Split down the middle. That's what family does. Tell me, have you ever had someone say exactly the right thing and feel the relief wash over you so completely that you stop asking follow-up questions? Because that's what I did. I stopped asking. I just trusted him. Marcus and I liquidated what we could, without destroying our retirement. I sold the Subaru on a Thursday for $9,000 cash and drove home in Marcus's car, quietly. That night I sat on our kitchen floor with my laptop open, transferring money, and I told myself this was what you do for people you love. You don't keep score. You just show up. My brother showed up too, just not in the way I expected. 3 days before our mother's surgery, he texted me a photo. Turquoise water, a terrace with a view. Him in a linen shirt with his arm around a woman I vaguely recognized from his social media, tall, dark hair, the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had to sell your car. Santorini, before the craziness, he wrote. "Kayla needed this. She's been so stressed with the promotion." I read that text 4 times. Then I called him. He didn't pick up. I texted, "What about Mom's surgery? What about the money we talked about?" He replied 6 hours later. "I'm sending what I can. Things are complicated right now financially. You know how it is. You and Marcus can cover it. You're good with money. Mom needs this taken care of, and I know you won't let her down." And there it was. The move I had seen my entire childhood, but never quite named. The pivot. The moment where my reliability became his exit strategy. "You're good at this, so I don't have to be." I sat with that text for a long time. Marcus found me at the kitchen table at midnight, still staring at my phone. He read it over my shoulder and set his hand on the back of my neck and didn't say anything for a moment, because he knew me well enough to know that what I needed wasn't words yet. Then he said, very quietly, "We cover it. For your mom, not for him." And we did. Our mother's surgery took 4 hours. She came out on the other side tired and shaky and alive, which is the only outcome I had allowed myself to imagine. I sat next to her bed and held her hand while she slept. My brother sent a flower arrangement. The card said, "Pulling for you, Mom. Handle things fast, Maya, you always do." I remember reading that card out loud to Marcus in the hospital cafeteria, and both of us just staring at it like it was an artifact from another species. Did you know that rage, when you hold it long enough, stops feeling hot? It goes cold. It becomes something you can carry in your pocket, something you almost forget is there until you reach for something else, and your hand closes around it instead. I carried it quietly for about 3 months. I answered my brother's texts at normal speed. I showed up to family dinners. I watched him sit across from our mother, newly recovered, and accept her gratitude for how he'd handled everything. I watched her pat his hand. I smiled at the table and drank my wine, and said nothing. Marcus would find me sometimes late at night, sitting at my desk, going through our bank records. Not obsessively, just carefully, methodically. The way you do when you're a third-grade teacher and you've spent a decade learning that documentation is the only thing that makes the invisible visible. He'd ask, "What are you looking for?" I'd say, "I'm not sure yet, but I'll know it when I find it." And then one evening in March, Marcus came home from a long shift with his laptop tucked under his arm, and the particular expression on his face that meant he'd found something he didn't want to have found. He'd been helping my parents with their insurance forms. Their financial power of attorney was shared between him and my brother, a decision made years ago because my brother was the attorney, and it seemed practical. He set the laptop on the dining table, open to a scanned statement. He didn't say anything. He just pointed. There was a transfer, dated 2 weeks before our mother's surgery. From my parents' joint savings account, a fund I hadn't even known still existed, money they'd set aside over decades to an account I didn't recognize. The memo line said, "Family Medical Coordinated Disbursement." It was almost exactly half of what the surgery had cost. I looked at Marcus. He looked at me. "Whose account is that?" I asked. He pulled up a second document. It took me a moment to recognize the routing numbers, and then another moment to believe what I was recognizing. It was my brother's personal account. I want to be careful here, because I'm not a lawyer, and neither is this story. What I know is what the documents showed. What I know is that my brother had access, as co-power of attorney, to my parents' savings. What I know is that a transfer happened 2 weeks before surgery, that I believed we were splitting. What I know is that he went to Santorini. What I know is that I sold my car. Marcus asked me, very carefully, "What do you want to do with this?" I opened a folder on my laptop. I named it something boring, something that would never make anyone curious if they glimpsed my screen. And I started saving documents. Are you the kind of person who acts immediately? Or the kind who waits until the moment is right? Because I used to think patience was something I'd never been good at. Turns out I just needed the right reason. 4 months after my mother's surgery, my brother called me on a Sunday afternoon, voice warm and easy, the voice he uses when he wants something. He and Kayla were engaged. He was over the moon. They were planning a party, not just a party, a proper engagement celebration at the rooftop venue downtown, the one that costs more per hour than I make in a week, teaching 9-year-olds how to read. Kayla's family was flying in from Connecticut. Her father was a founding partner at a firm that my brother had been trying to get work from for 2 years. This was important, he said. This was a big deal. And of course, he said, he wanted me to speak. I was the big sister. I knew him better than anyone. It would mean so much if I could stand up there and really paint a picture of who he is for Kayla's family. He said, "You're a great speaker, Maya. Remember how you talked at Dad's retirement party? You had the whole room going. That's what I need. That's you." There it was again, the compliment that is actually an assignment. I told him I'd be honored. After I hung up, I sat for a long moment in the quiet of my kitchen. Marcus was at the stove, not looking at me, stirring something he was pretending required his full attention. "I'm going to do it," I said. He turned around. He looked at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "I need you to help me make sure the AV system at that venue can run a USB file." He nodded slowly. And then, because he is the best person I have ever known, "Okay, tell me what else." I spent the next 6 weeks preparing 2 speeches. The first one was beautiful. Genuinely. I wrote about watching my brother learn to ride a bike, about the way he used to defend me from a neighborhood kid who teased me in 5th grade, about how proud I was the day he passed the bar. Every word of it was true, every word of it was real. That speech was the person I had always wanted my brother to be. The second speech was different. I emailed the venue coordinator a week before the party, introducing myself as the maid of honor designate and the bride-to-be's future sister-in-law, asking if I could preload a multimedia presentation to run during my remarks as a surprise tribute. She wrote back within the hour, "We love surprises. Just bring a USB the night before, and we'll set it up." I named the file something that sounded exactly like a sweet sister speech would be named. I double-checked that the opening frame's photos of my brother and me as kids, a picture of our whole family at my mother's 50th birthday, would play first, soft and warm, the kind of thing that makes an audience relax. What came after was not soft. The evening of the engagement party, the rooftop was genuinely stunning. String lights, the city laid out below us, like a jewelry display, linen tablecloths, servers in black moving between clusters of guests, who all seemed to own boats. Kayla was radiant. Her parents were elegant and polished, the kind of people who make you aware of your posture just by standing near them. Her father, I'll call him the founding partner, shook my hand and said he'd heard so much about me, which I suspected was not entirely true, but appreciated anyway. My brother was in his element. He moved through the room the way he always does in situations like this, confident and easy, the practiced charm of a man who has spent his entire adult life turning rooms full of skeptical people into believers. He found me early in the evening and gripped my shoulder. "You look great," he said. "I can't tell you how much tonight means. Just be yourself up there. You always kill it." I smiled. "I will absolutely be myself," I said. Marcus squeezed my hand once. Quick, under the table at dinner. I squeezed back. Kayla's mother leaned across to me at one point, warm and genuinely curious, and asked how our mother was recovering. "Fine," I told her. "She's doing really well." It was a scary few months, but we got through it. The family pulled together. I watched my brother hear that from across the table, watched him smile and nod like it was simply true, like the word we meant something it hadn't meant. After the main course, the MC, a college friend of my brother's, who did this kind of thing on weekends, tapped the microphone and announced that we had a very special speaker. "The big sister," he said. "The woman who has known the groom longer than anyone in this room. Please welcome Maya." The applause was warm. Kayla beamed. My brother stood to lead the clapping, proud and unsuspecting. I walked to the center of the floor. I took the microphone. I looked at the audience, Kayla's family in the front rows, my brother's colleagues, mutual friends, my parents at a table to the left, my mother looking healthy and beautiful, my father unaware of everything I was about to say. I looked at the DJ. I gave him the nod we'd arranged. The screen behind me came to life. The first images were exactly what everyone expected: childhood photos, the kind that make a room go warm and a little nostalgic. My brother, at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning on a bike I vaguely remembered he'd begged for. The two of us at Christmas in matching sweaters. Our family at the Grand Canyon on a trip we'd taken when I was 12, squinting into the sun. For those who don't know me, I began, I'm Maya. I've been a third-grade teacher for 8 years, which means I've spent most of my adult life believing that if you explain something clearly enough and you show your work, people will understand what actually happened. Tonight, I want to show my work. A small laugh from the crowd. My brother smiled. I continued. I also want to acknowledge Kayla, who is clearly warm and kind, and deserves to go into this marriage with full information about the family she's joining. I think that's the most loving thing I can give her tonight. The smile on my brother's face shifted slightly. Chairs creaked. The slideshow changed. On the screen now was the hospital. Not a dramatic image, just a photo I had taken on my phone one morning. The exterior of Mercy General, with the words on the building visible. I had kept it without knowing why. Now I knew why. 7 months ago, I said, our mother had surgery for a brain aneurysm. She is recovered, and she is here tonight. And I want to say in front of everyone that she is the toughest person I know. The next image, a photo of my mother and me in the hospital corridor, after she'd been cleared to walk. She was laughing at something off camera. I looked tired and relieved. Our mother's surgery was expensive. I won't give you the number because that's private. What I will tell you is that my husband and I made a plan to cover our share, and my brother told me we would split it down the middle. The screen shifted to a screenshot of his text message, projected large enough that the people in the back could read it without squinting. Split down the middle. That's what family does. Complete silence from the front rows. I sold my car to make my half of that payment, I continued. I transferred money from savings accounts that Marcus and I had spent 4 years building. I did this without hesitation because I love our mother, and because I believed my brother when he said he was in. The next slide, a screenshot of the Santorini post. My brother in his linen shirt, Kayla beside him, the water behind them almost cartoonishly blue. The caption visible, Santorini before the craziness. She needed this. He posted this 3 days before our mother's surgery, I said. When I called to ask about the money we'd discussed, he told me things were complicated. He told me I was good at handling this kind of thing. He told me he'd send what he could. I heard a sound from my mother's table. I didn't look. I looked at Kayla's father instead, who was leaning forward slightly. The expression of a man who has spent 40 years reading rooms and was currently reading this one very carefully. I want to be fair, I said. I want to give my brother the benefit of the doubt that maybe he simply didn't have the money. That happens. That would have been okay to say. But then my husband found something while helping my parents with their insurance forms. The next slide appeared. It was a cropped version of the bank transfer my parents' account on one side, the transaction amount in the center, the destination account on the other. I had redacted everything except the relevant line items and the date. This is a transfer, I said, from my parents' savings, a fund that exists to cover exactly these kinds of emergencies. It was made 2 weeks before the surgery. As co-power of attorney, my brother had access to this account to coordinate payments. The amount transferred was almost exactly half the surgical cost. It went into his personal account. The memo says, coordinated disbursement. I watched my brother's face go the kind of still that only happens when a person's entire public identity is suddenly at risk. I'm not standing here to litigate this, I said, because I'm a teacher, not a lawyer. What I'm standing here to do is something much simpler. I'm here to answer the question that everyone in this room who loves Kayla should probably be asking, which is, what does this family actually look like when the cameras aren't running? Kayla, I said, turning to her directly, you are about to marry into a story I've been told my whole life about what family means. I have been told that family pulls together. I have been told that family keeps its promises. I've watched those words used as a shield and as a weapon and as a brand, depending on what was needed in the moment. I paused. I sold my car for our mother. He went to Santorini. And then he stood in this room tonight, expecting me to describe him as a man of integrity. Kayla's father slowly set down his glass. My brother stood up. His voice was controlled but barely. Maya, he said, that's enough. This is not the place. I held up one hand. Not aggressive, just steady. I know, I said. Public is uncomfortable. I've noticed that about our family, we're very good at private behavior and very invested in public image. You made this public when you put me on a stage and handed me a microphone. You made it public when you invited your future father-in-law, who I understand you've been hoping will bring his firm's business your way. I am simply being the speaker you asked me to be. One of my brother's colleagues, a woman I recognized from his firm's holiday party the year before, murmured something to the man beside her. He nodded grimly. The founding partner leaned toward his wife and said something quiet. Then he looked at my brother, and it was not the look of a man who was about to refer business. I looked out at the rest of the room, at the friends who'd known my brother for years, at my parents. My mother's face was unreadable, something between grief and recognition, the face of a woman who knows what she's seeing but isn't ready to name it yet. My father had both hands flat on the table, very still. I took a breath. Here is what I actually want to say, I said. Not the part about the money, not the part about the bank statements. What I actually want to say is this. I love my brother. I love the version of him that is capable of being good. I have seen him be good. I wrote a whole other speech about the times he was good, and part of me wanted to just give that one tonight and pretend the other things weren't real. But I also spent 6 months watching my mother recover while he sent flower arrangements and accepted gratitude he hadn't earned, and I realized that pretending is not actually love. Pretending is just another form of abandonment. You abandon the truth to protect someone's comfort, and you abandon yourself in the process. Kayla, I said again, softly, I hope he chooses better. I hope this is a moment where something shifts. I genuinely do. You deserve someone who shows up. So does he. Honestly, he deserves to actually become the person he performs being. I turned to my brother. He was still standing. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing something complicated that I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. I'm not trying to ruin you, I said. I'm trying to stop letting you practice on me. I handed the microphone back to the MC. I nodded to the DJ. The screen faded. The room held its breath for what felt like a full minute. Then Dylan, Kayla's younger brother, early 30s, the one who'd been charming everyone at cocktail hour, slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at my brother. She sold her car, he said. Just so we're tracking that correctly. My brother opened his mouth. And Kayla's father stood up. He placed his napkin on the table with the particular deliberateness of someone who has ended many meetings. He looked at my brother for a moment. Then he said, I think we'll give you some time with your family tonight. And he guided his wife toward the exit, Kayla's mother following with a tight, apologetic smile, aimed somewhere between me and the room. Kayla hadn't moved. She was very still at the sweetheart table, her ring catching the string lights, her expression the complicated arrangement of a woman who has just discovered that a story she believed about the person she loves is missing several chapters. My brother turned to her first. The words he used, I won't repeat. That conversation belongs to them. Marcus appeared at my elbow before I'd fully processed that I was done. He put his arm around my shoulders and walked me quietly toward the elevator without making it look like an exit. In the elevator going down, he looked at me and said, You okay? I thought about it. I felt like I'd been holding a very heavy piece of furniture for years and had just set it down exhausted, relieved, my arms shaking slightly from the absence of the weight. Yeah, I said. I think I actually am. The fallout came in waves. My brother called that night, then texted, then called again. The calls were not apologies. The first few were about damage control. Who had I told? What exactly did the bank statement show? Did I understand what I'd done to his professional reputation? The text shifted over the next few days to something more fragile. 2 of them, in the early hours of the morning, were almost honest. Almost. My mother called on Wednesday. Her voice was quieter than usual. She said, I need to understand what I saw on that screen. So I explained it. All of it. The texts, the Santorini post, the bank records, what Marcus had found in the insurance documents. I spoke carefully, and I didn't editorialize. I just laid it out like a lesson plan. Here is what happened. Here is the evidence. Here is what it means. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, Why didn't you tell me? Because you were recovering, I said. And because I didn't want you to have to choose. She said, Oh, sweetheart. And that was, somehow, the moment I cried. Not at the party. Not during any of the 6 months of preparation. Not in the elevator going down. But on the phone with my mother, when she said those 2 words in that exact voice. The voice of a woman who finally understood something she should have understood much sooner. Kayla postponed the engagement. I don't know what she and my brother discussed. I don't know what she decided or will decide. That's not my story to tell. What I know is that 3 of my brother's colleagues who were at that party had conversations with him in the following weeks that I'm told were not comfortable. What I know is that the founding partner's firm did not become a client. What I know is that my parents are having a different kind of conversation with my brother now, a real one, not a managed one. What I know is that my mother called me on a Sunday morning recently, just to talk, just to ask how school was going. And at the end, she said, I want you to know I see you. I always did, but I think I let other things be louder. That was enough. It was more than enough. I still teach 3rd grade. I still drive Marcus's car on days he doesn't need it, and the bus on days he does. We found a secondhand Civic that I like almost as much as the Subaru, and I am approximately halfway to paying it off. Our down payment fund is recovering. Our mother calls twice a week. Last month, one of my students, a kid named Felix, who has been struggling to read since September, finally got through a full paragraph out loud without stopping. He looked up at me with this stunned expression like he hadn't known his own face was capable of that kind of light. And I thought, this is the work. This is the thing I show up for. Not to be recognized, not to be thanked, just to be present for the moment when someone finally sees what they're capable of. I think about the speech I gave sometimes. I think about whether I went too far or not far enough. I think about the version of that night where I gave the beautiful speech, the one about the bike and the bar exam, and went home having performed forgiveness I didn't feel. I think about what the next 6 years would have looked like if I had. Here's what I've landed on. Silence is not neutral. When you protect someone from the consequences of how they treat you, you're not being kind. You're just making the world smaller and smaller until you're the only one who can't breathe in it. I'm not a revenge person. I want to be honest about that. I didn't walk into that rooftop venue thinking about destroying anything. I walked in thinking about one thing. The moment I stood in a hospital corridor with $8,000 I didn't have, and a text that said that's what family does, and believed it, and then was alone with my belief while he ordered room service in Santorini. I walked in thinking, he handed me the mic. I'm just going to use it. If you've ever been the one who sold the car, the one who showed up, who covered it, who kept the peace, who held your tongue at the dinner table, while someone else accepted credit for your sacrifice, I want you to know something. The mic gets handed to us eventually. It always does. The question is only what we choose to say when we're holding it. Where are you watching from right now? And have you ever been in a room where someone handed you exactly the thing you needed to finally tell the truth?